All right. Being in the vortex on a daily basis and walking around.
Can you
and
hear clearly? Good.
And speaking for myself, of course.
Yes.
I'll go into, say, driving. Driving's a good example. And you're driving down the highway and you go into more of an autopilot. And so for myself, come out of the vortex, something happens, and I feel like experiences from the past, I react in a way that I don't want to react, but from past experiences, I'll react in that particular, I'll say, negative way.
Is a good example because whether you're driving or doing other things, you do have beliefs or patterns of thought. We call that pre-paving. In other words, it's setting forth the vibrational inclination, which makes what comes next more likely. You're right.
So how do I work to have that happen less on a daily basis? And
well, first, let us say that we like this subject a lot. We like the way you've set it up because you know before you get into your automobile that you're going to do that. It's likely that you've known for quite a while that you're going to be in your car at this particular day or at this particular time of day. Often you're there at that particular time of day every day or most days. And so if you are aware that sometimes you create by default, in other words, you let beliefs that you don't even realize that are active within you take over, then that contrasting experience might cause you to say, I think I will be more deliberate about my life experience. I think I will be more aware of the segments of my day. So you think in terms of driving in general. You say things to yourself like, I'm a good driver. You say things about yourself to yourself like, I'm an intuitive person. You say things to yourself like, I like knowing where I am in relationship to other things or other drivers. You say things to yourself such as, I have an inner being who has a broader view, who is aware of me at all times, who is also aware of other drivers at all times. So now you've made these general statements about who you are, about your wisdom, about your connection, about your intention. I like to be safe. I like to be efficient. I like to move about effectively. So now you've set all of that in motion. There is a sort of vibrational roadway that you've prepared. You've sent energy out ahead of you to prepave the road before you, the literal road before you. Now, as you get into your vehicle, you could stop if you'd planned ahead for that a little bit, take a minute or two or three, and just breathe, settle yourself in, get the car temperature in a way that feels good to you. Identify what music or whatever you want to listen to, and then say to yourself something like, I expect this to be a very nice experience. You might even address your own inner being by saying, you guys ready to go? Because they always are. The question is, are you ready to be ready for us all going with you? In other words, how tuned in you are. And so if you've prepaved just that much, which would not take that much time, you'd find yourself being aware of what route to take. You'd find yourself being aware of when to leave. You might feel a little almost uneasiness that said, I think I'll start out 10 minutes earlier today. You might find yourself pausing a little bit or going some way that you've not been before. You might find yourself being sensitive to what's going in the cars around you. You might feel an oddness in the pod of cars that's surrounding you. In other words, your intuitiveness, your sensitivity to your surroundings is the most important thing that we are wanting you all to learn how to tune to, because your inner being knows where you are in relationship to everyone else, and most of all in relationship to your intentions in this moment. But let's be real for just a moment, just a tiny little moment. Most of you get into your vehicle and you don't give much thought to anything other than just getting on with where you're going. And so you have to put up with your absence of pre-paving. Now, it's not that the pre-paving hasn't taken place, because your inner being is always doing that pre-paving for you. Didn't know that, did you? You have a guidance system that knows where you're planning on going and knows the route that you're planning on taking and has a very clear, very decided opinion or perspective about what you've decided to do. So when you get into your vehicle and you feel uneasiness about what you've decided to do, it's worth stopping and thinking, What's this uneasiness about? Perhaps my inner being has a different opinion about it than I do. So sit with the intention of settling in. Utilize your guidance system. You see, there's just no excuse to have guidance that you are not tapping into. And there's no excuse to not have a good time all the time, because you have the ability to do that if you just understand all of the ramifications of your moment in time. Make sense to you?
Yes.
The other reason that we like this analogy that you are offering is because we've been using an analogy about staying in your lane, because we've noticed that of all the things you do, being in your car and driving is usually, not for everyone, not all the time, but usually for most of you, more of the time, a time of greater connection to source energy. It's a time when, if you would put your devices down and tune into your now, not somebody else's now, your now where you are right here and now, you with your tires on the road, you here and now, moving from place to place. If you would tune in to where you are right now, that is a really great opportunity for you to receive those impulses. And you know it because you find yourself changing lanes when you really didn't have a big plan to do it, and realizing that things opened up for you. Or have you ever slowed and then seen something happen that you realize, oh, that's why I was slowing? You have guidance. Every one of you has that guidance. Not many of you are tapping into it deliberately, but you could. Something else? Talk to us about where you are in this.
Okay, so it's along the same lines, and I used driving because that was one example. Another example, and I'm, as you're talking to us about it, working to relate it, another example is around money. And also along the same lines of being in the vortex and being connected with like my guidance system, I'm good. But then there'll be moments where I'm not saying, so sort of the same question as driving, I'm not connected, and I'll even have like a physicalness in my body. I'll feel it physically in my body tighten up if something's too much, or a surprise comes up, or something I wasn't expected and the money isn't really there, and the tenseness happens, and I'll feel it through my whole body. And I continue wondering, is that something that I need to work through, or is it just staying in the vortex and there is nothing to work through, it just will go away?
Well, it would be nice for us to say to you, just get in the vortex and stay there. The end. It would be nice for us to say, get into that receiving mode where you can clearly hear and receive guidance and impulses so that you can always be in the right place at the right time. But it's also right for us to say to you, and good for you to hear, that you are where you are, and asking yourself to be in a different financial situation, or in a different driving situation, or even in a different emotional state is not really a very productive way to go about it. It would be like saying to you, just jump over the house. And you would say, okay. But you don't have the ability or the facility right now to just jump over the house. And so there's something very beneficial about stopping right where you are, in your tension, in your physical discomfort, in your emotional discomfort, in your even argument with someone. Stop right where you are once you're aware that you're not feeling good, and just acknowledge that you are where you are, and that's all right. And this is the way we would soothe it if we were standing in your physical shoes. You're always on your way somewhere. You are an eternal being, and there's never going to be a time that you're just done and not doing something more. So more is always going to be unfolding for you. And this is the piece that specifically we want you to hear in specific response to the two specific subjects that you are focusing toward us right here and now. If you're standing here and where you want to be is over here, there's a path from where you are to where you want to be. And your inner being knows what that logical path is. So when we say path of least resistance, we're really saying path of most logic. We're saying most likely path for you to take. We're not saying path of you overcoming the stupid resistance that you've put down, even though every bit of resistance that is on your path you have put there. But your source is not condemning or judging resistance on your path. Your source is not judging where you stand, because the source within you understands that you're always going to be standing in a place lesser than where you now intend to be, because you are an eternal being always on your way somewhere. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
So if you would give yourself a break, lighten up on yourself about not feeling comfortable right where you are, and instead say, all right, it is what it is. I am where I am. Now what? You would be much more likely to hear the next logical, reasonable encouragement for you. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Now we want to amplify that just a little bit more here. So as you are on your way to some place that you want to be, sometimes the path isn't clear because, as you said, you have beliefs that are in the way. Well, those beliefs are not just going to go away because somebody says those beliefs are in your way. They're beliefs that you've put into place bit by bit. They are thoughts that you continue to think. They are thoughts that continue to come up because other things remind you of those thoughts. They are active thoughts which now represent active resistance in your way. Can you accept that? So now imagine your inner being seeing you standing where you are, loving you standing where you are, feeling your worthiness standing where you are, who is now evaluating the whole thing. Here's where you are, here's where you want to be, and these are the beliefs that you currently hold that are keeping you from where you want to be. Are you still with us?
Yes.
So your loving inner being is not saying to you, get rid of those beliefs. Your loving inner being is saying, if you will come this way, you will come to understand the belief that you hold more clearly than you ever have before. If you will come this way, in other words, sometimes your inner being is actually calling you on what we are insisting is always the path of least resistance, right into something that might initially feel a little worse for you, because it's giving you an opportunity to acknowledge, hey, wait a minute, I've got some patterns going on here. I've got some things that have been happening, and that pattern relative to that has dissipated. So maybe this pattern relative to this can dissipate too, because your inner being cannot think for you. Your inner being cannot just wipe away the resistance that's on your trail. But what your inner being can do is shine a light on the resistance, a loving light on the resistance, a loving, benevolent light on the resistance. No condemnation, no judging, just it is what it is, but here's a way around it, and here's another way around it, and maybe you might want to not be so hard on yourself about this and that and the other. And so you just leave those pieces of resistance right where they are. You just move on from them. You don't wrestle them to the ground and kill them. You don't try to understand them ad nauseum. You just accept that that was something that I used to think that no longer applies, that my inner being doesn't think, that doesn't serve me to think it, and I don't need to think it anymore, so I'm just moving on. How about that?
Excellent.